What's up, y'all? Nefertiti, the Corny Rainbow here, and today I have another sew along for you guys. It is my new summer Nomi 2045 pattern, and this features 5 contrasting colors, tiered dress, all gathered ruffles, tears. You're probably gonna cry while making this. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. If you're anything like me and you do absolutely love gathered looks, this is a pattern for you. It is fully lined, and we also have some adjustable straps for you. So you're going to need 1/2 inch sliders and rings for this pattern. If you are having a hard time finding the sliders or rings, I do suggest going into that drawer, maybe pulling out an old bra or even maybe a cami that has some sliders, and recycle those things, okay? Like reuse. You can also find them online or at any craft stores. So let's talk about some fabric choices that you can use for this pattern. The pattern does recommend that you use a lightweight tulle or a netting. And if you choose to use those two fabrics, then you can go without hemming those, because who's hemming tulle? Like, I don't know. But you won't need to actually hem the tulle, so your ruffles will just be cut, and you would also cut off the seam allowance for those. But if you are using chiffon, like I will be using in this sew along, then I would suggest using a 2 or 3 thread rolled hem, and you can do so with your serger. I'll be sharing how you can do that in the sew along. I'm going to be using a 2 thread rolled hem, and it's totally your preference. So if you decide that you want to use 3 thread rolled hem, it's fine. But I again will be using a chiffon fabric, and I absolutely love this pattern. Being a summer baby, the vibe was rainbows, summer, flowy, gathered dress that you can just feel really good in. I mean, you can wear this to the beach. You can take this with you on vacation. It's just one of those looks that you can just really have fun with. You don't have to do all of the contrasting colors. You can maybe do 2 contrasting colors or 3 contrasting colors, or you can do all one color or one print for this pattern. It's totally up to you. Just have fun. If you don't have chiffon on hand, which is totally fine, you can also use rayons. You can use polyester. Basically, the fabrics that are listed for lining, you can use those fabrics as well. I would just suggest anything that's flowy and lightweight. Cotton blends or polyester blends will also do just fine. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the sew along. Let's go over the pattern pieces that you're going to need for this sew along. All right, you're going to need pattern piece number 1, which is your bodice front. You're going to cut 1 on the fold. Pattern piece number 2, which is your bodice back, you're going to cut 2, and make sure to transfer all your markings and your notches. Pattern piece number 5, which is your tier, which is going to be the first tier under your bodice front. You're going to cut 2 on the fold. Your second tier is pattern piece number 7, and you're going to cut 2 on the fold. Pattern piece number 9, which is your third tier, you're going to cut 2 on the fold. Pattern piece number 11, which is tier number 4, you're going to cut 2 on the fold. Pattern piece number 13, which is your last tier, you're going to cut 2 on the fold. For your front ruffle, which is pattern piece number 3, you're going to cut 1 on the fold. For your back ruffle, you're going to cut 2. This is pattern piece number 4. For ruffle number 1, you're going to cut 2 on the fold. This is pattern piece number 6. Ruffle number 2, pattern piece number 8, you're going to cut 3 on the fold. Ruffle number 3, you're going to cut 3 on the fold as well. This is pattern piece number 10. Ruffle number 4, you're going to cut 3 on the fold. This is pattern piece number 12. Ruffle number 5, pattern piece number 14, you're going to cut 4 on the fold. pattern piece number 15, which is your lower ruffle, you're going to cut 4 on the fold. All right, for your front strap, you're going to cut 2 of lining. For your back strap, you're going to cut 2 of lining. For your tie-in, you're going to cut 2 of lining. Your front facing, you're going to cut 1 on the fold of lining and 1 on the fold of interfacing. Your back facing, you're going to cut 2 of lining and 2 of interfacing. I do want to add that for your front strap, your back strap, and your tie-in, the pattern does suggest that you use a lining fabric. If you're using a chiffon, a rayon, or any fabric that can withstand being strong enough for your straps, you can use those types of fabric as well. You don't have to use your lining fabric for these straps. This is a preference, but it's also one of my suggestions if you want everything to match up with your straps and that first front and back piece. For your lining, we have slip back pattern piece number 20. You're going to cut 2 of lining. And we have pattern piece number 19, which is our slip front. You're going to cut 1 of lining on the fold. All right, so first you're going to grab your tie-in, and you should have 2 of these. I'm just going to show you the one. So we're going to fold it right sides together, and then you can pin, clip, whatever you have handy. And these are really tiny, so you're going to be turning these right side out. So just keep that in mind. And then we're just going to stitch at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then you're going to leave one edge open. If you don't have one of those turners to turn your straps right side out, you can also use what I like to do is the yarn method, and you're just going to get you a piece of yarn longer than the strap, and then you're going to sew it down, and it's going to help you to turn the strap right side out, and then when you're finished you can just clip it right off. We are going to stitch down 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to turn this baby out. You should have one edge that is closed off and one edge that is open. So go ahead and do that for both tie-ins and come back. All right, I'm gonna give this a good press, and then I'm just gonna cut off that yarn there. Give your ties a good press, and we're gonna go ahead and pin them to our back bodice piece. All right, so you're gonna get your bodice back, and you should have transferred your markings and your dots. So on that first small dot up top, we're gonna place our tie right on that dot, matching the edges up, and pin. And you're gonna go ahead and baste this down for both bodice back pieces. All right, so I went ahead and grabbed my bodice front, and with right sides together, I am going to match up my notches on the side here. So you should have both back pieces pinned to your side seams of your bodice front. Go ahead and stitch this at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then go ahead and finish off your raw edge of your bodice back by doing a narrow hem. All right, give everything a good press and come back. All right, so now we have reached the fun part, which is finishing off the hem of your ruffle. On your bodice ruffle, you should have a marking, so you're making sure you don't hem the wrong edge, but our marking is here. This is going to be our end, and we're just going to go all the way around, and still do 5/8 of an inch when I'm finishing off my hem. All right, so we have a nice finished rolled hem, and you can go ahead and give this a press. After you press, we're going to go ahead and we're going to base stitch all the way around our top edge, and we are going to have to gather this very long piece of fabric, our front bodice ruffle. All right, so I went ahead and I did one stitch. This is again by preference, but it seems to work just fine for me. And it also cuts down on time a little bit. So you want to make sure that your seams are towards the inside. We're going to go ahead and pin this to the right side of our bodice front and back. So wrong side of your ruffle is going to go to right side of your bodice front and back. Go ahead and just match up your side seams and adjust your gathers as needed. Also, I went ahead and I finished the hem on the edge of the ruffle, so make sure you do that before sewing everything down. And you're going to match up those dots again on the edge. All right, you've got everything pinned or clipped. Now we're going to go ahead and base this down at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. We are going to base this down. All right, so we have attached our first ruffle to our front and back bodice. Now we are going to work on our straps, our shoulder straps. So grab your front strap, and you should have markings on one edge, and we are going to fold in the same manner that we did our ties, with right sides together. And we're going to stitch at 1/4 of an inch seam. Both edges are going to remain open on this strap, so keep that in mind. If you are using the yarn method, go ahead and stitch both straps, and grab your back strap and do the same thing. So we're going to fold it right sides together, and we are stitching 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then turn everything right side out. Once you finish your front and back straps, give them a good press, and you should have a small and large dot that you marked on your front and back bodice. So we are going to pin our front strap right at those dots, matching. On both sides. You can see my dots here. Right in the middle there. All right, then you're going to baste both straps down, and grabbing your back strap, I've already got out my sliders, and we are going to slide one end with the right side facing you. The right side should be on both sides once you get it through the slider. And then we are going to pin. We're going to baste at the edge here, and we're going to do that for both back straps. All right, so there's one. The second one, we're going to slide through again. The wrong side should be facing you when you're sliding it through. And once you fold it over, you should see the right side on both sides. All right, baste your back straps and baste your front straps down at your dots. So I went ahead and basted down at 5/8 of an inch for my front straps, and I went ahead, and you should have markings on the back part of your bodice, and we're going to pin our back strap and baste as well. Go ahead and baste at 5/8 of an inch both of your back straps. Okay, so we basted down our back strap. Now we're going to put this to the side, and we are going to work on our first tier. Grab tier number 1. You should have cut out 2 on the fold. Keep in mind that for one piece you have markings, and that's just to let you know that this is a front piece. So you should have 2 small dots on one of your pattern pieces. And make sure you pay attention to all of the notches. So you should have a notch on the top edge of each, just to make sure you're not sewing the wrong sides together, but you also have notches on the side. So we are going to pin this right sides together with our notches up top. We're going to match our notches on the side, and we're going to stitch this at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance in the same manner as our front and back bodice. So go ahead and stitch both side seams at 5/8 of an inch, keeping in mind that the side with your markings is going to be used as your front piece. All right, so we have sewn together at the side seams on tier number 1. We're going to put that to the side for a second and grab your ruffle number 1, and with right sides together, we are going to stitch them at the side seam, matching up those notches. So go ahead and stitch your side seams together, and we're going to do the same thing that we did for our first ruffle. You're going to baste. You can do your 2 train tracks, and we're also going to finish off our hem with a rolled hem, or a regular serge, or a French seam, whichever you choose. Again, I'm going to be using a rolled hem for the entire dress. Whatever method you decide to use is fine, but go ahead, do that, and come back and we will move on to the next step. All right, y'all, So I went ahead and I finished off the hem and gathered my ruffle on my ruffle one and my tier one, attached them with the wrong side of the ruffle to the right side of the tier, and I've pinned everything. We're going to do the same exact thing. You should also have notches, 2 notches on each tier. So while you're gathering, make it a little bit easier, find those notches. And then also I like to start off by matching my side seams first. Now when you're gathering, the best way to do this, if you're doing the ruffles with two ruffle parts, is at each seam, that's where you're gonna start a new gathering stitch. So I have a gathering stitch here and I have another one starting here so that I can adjust the gathers on the front and the back evenly. All right, I know it looks excessive. Trust me, this is not one of these projects that you're just gonna rush through. It's gonna take you some time, so please be patient with yourself and go ahead and base this down. And then we're gonna attach this to our front and back bodice. All right, this is already looking so yummy. What I went ahead and did is I basted the ruffle onto the tier, and I marked where my center is, but you still remember you have those notches. So we're going to attach the front bodice to the tier number 1, and you've got notches here and here on the front, and also a notch on each back piece. So with right sides together, I'm going to flip over my bodice front, find those notches, and you do want to make sure that you look for those dots on your tier number 1 so that you make sure you are pinning it to the front. And then also match those side seams up. This step is much easier than gathering. Okay, once you get to the center back, you want to make sure that you are matching up your center with that dot of the hemmed edge. Make sure that you are not stitching down your ruffle, just the tier on the front bodice there. Bring around the other side. You see how it is matching up nicely with our other edge. So those dots should somewhat overlap, creating a V here. And then go ahead and match your notch up. Stitch this at 5/8 of an inch, and we are going to move on to tier number 2. All right, so I went ahead and I attached ruffle and tier number 1 to our top bodice. So as you can see, we have matched up our back pieces. All right, so we're gonna put this to the side, and if you like, you can go ahead and finish your raw edges on the inside. If you're using a fabric that frays a lot, I do suggest that you go ahead and do that. And we're gonna grab our ruffle number 2 and our tier number 2. So for tier number 2, we should still have our front pieces with our markings on them. And you're gonna have markings on the top and on the bottom. This is where we're gonna place our seams for our ruffle. Because we're using three pieces for our ruffle instead of the 2, gathering just 2, we need to place them in between the seams. So go ahead and pin these together, matching your notches, and stitch at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, the same as our other tiers. Go ahead and grab ruffle number 2, and you should have 3 pieces cut on the fold. This is my right side of fabric. It's pretty long, so go ahead and match up your notches right sides together. You should end up with a very long this is what we have together. Okay, we're stitching at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and finish off your raw edges and also your hem, and go ahead and do your gathering stitches on the top row, same as your last tier. All right, so go ahead and go to the machine and meet me back here, and we're going to attach this to tier number 2. All right, so I made a little bit of a mistake, and I pinned my ruffle to my tier with right sides together, so I did have to seam rip everything out and start all over. So please don't make the same mistake that I made. Sometimes when you are a little bit tired and you're still working through it, mistakes can happen, but that is okay. So with wrong side of your ruffle to right side of your tier, go ahead and match up the dot on the front, the marking on the front, to one of your ruffle seams. Go ahead and pin all the way around. Pin or clip. And then there's another marking at the top of your tier, and match that second seam up. Make sure that your side seam on your tier is going towards the back. I marked the center of my back tier because that is where my ruffle seam is going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and mark there, pin that down there. And then I can work my way out. Now with wrong side of your ruffle to right side of your tier, same as before, go ahead and base down 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so we good now. We're gonna move on to pinning tier number 2 to tier number 1. All right, so grab your bodice and it's tier number 1, and we're going to make sure that you are pinning your side seams together. So this is our back. Let's flip that over, and this time with right sides together. Match up those side seams. And make sure that you're pinning your front to your front, so you still should have those markings on your front piece. Okay. All right, go ahead and stitch down at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and meet me back here. All right, so it is looking really nice. So make sure that you press your seam allowance up on both your tier number 1 and tier number 2. And we are going to do the same exact thing for tier number 3. So go ahead and grab your tier number 3 and your ruffle number 3. Pin everything together. Go ahead and stitch each side seam at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Gather your top edge and finish off your rolled hem and pin right sides together, tier number 3. All right, once you finish attaching your ruffle to your tier number 3, we're going to attach it to tier number 2 in the same manner that we just did for tier number 1 and 2. So go ahead and finish all of that up and meet me back here for tier number 4. All right, so we have tier 2, 3, and 4 attached, and these 3 tiers are all the same. They all have 3 individual ruffle pattern pieces, and the tiers will always be 2 pieces. So for our last tier, we're doing the same exact thing, but we have 4 ruffles instead of 3. So you should have cut out 4 ruffles for ruffle number 5, which this is our almost to the end ruffle. We're almost at the finish line, and you should have 2 tiers. Same as before, and when you are attaching your ruffle to the top edge, we are still finding that marking, and we are going to put our seams from our ruffle onto those same markings as we did in tier number 4. So go ahead and do the same exact methods that we've done with our ruffles and our tiers in the last 4 tiers, and we will be moving on to our lower ruffle. All right, so you should have sewn and gathered your ruffle number 5 and put your tier together. So I want you to make sure that you do have markings on both the front and the back of your tiers. This is the only pattern piece that is mentioned where you need to transfer your markings on both front and back piece. All of the other tiers only are stating that you mark the front. So be sure that you're marking the back. And the reason why is because we have 4 ruffles here, and each marking is where we are putting our seam allowance, our side seam. So go ahead and match those up. And we are attaching this with the wrong side of our ruffle to the right side of our tier number 5. Once you have everything pinned, go ahead and baste at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then we are going to attach our lower ruffle. I've gone ahead and done my gathering stitches and my rolled hem for the lower ruffle. All right, go ahead and head over to the machine. I went ahead and I sewed ruffle number 5 to the tier. We basted that down. Now you're going to get your lower ruffle, and with right sides together, you're going to match up your markings with your seams. Go ahead and stitch your lower ruffle at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure that you are stitching a regular width stitch. We're not basting here. Once you have finished your lower tier, you're going to pin it to the bottom edge, and you're going to match up your side seams and stitch everything at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press all your seams up, and we're going to move on to our lining. All right, so all of your tiers are attached. You can go ahead and put your dress to the side. We are going to work on our lining. Grab your slip back, and you should have markings. So we are going to stitch until this marking here, down the center seam. So go ahead and pin. At the dot, we are going to do a narrow hem on each side. So go ahead and stitch. Press your seams open. Press your seams open. And go ahead and stitch a narrow hem all the way to the top on both sides. So do that, come back, and we're going to move on to the front. All right, so I've gone ahead and stitched at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance both of our back lining pieces together, and I stopped at that marking there and did a narrow hem on both sides. So you should have something that looks just like this. Now you should notice that each back piece has a marking. We are going to also do a narrow hem from the marking on down, and we are going to stitch with right sides together. Go ahead and grab your front lining piece. And you should have notches on the side. One of my notches is marked, but go ahead and pin until you get to that first marking on each side. We're going to do the same thing that we did for the center back seam. All right, so go ahead and stitch both side seams at 5/8 of an inch. And then you're going to trim just a little bit and fold in your narrow hem, and also go ahead and finish off your hem on the bottom of your entire lining piece. Once you have hemmed, or what I did is I serged my raw edge, and also press all of your seams open with your slip. You're going to match this up. Go ahead and grab your dress. So what we're doing is we're pinning the right side of our lining to the wrong side of our dress. And I'm going to start at this opening here, matching up my dots. Should also have a marking where we've gone ahead and attached our back strap. Then match your side seams up. Again, you should have markings for each strap. You want to make sure that your straps are out of the way. And you're basically going to use this seam allowance from the dress as your guide. So you're going to stitch right over that at 5/8 of an inch. Make sure that your straps are out of the way. You don't want to stitch those down, and go ahead and stitch our slip to our dress at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and meet me back. All right, so you've gone ahead and attached your lining to your dress. Now let's put this to the side and work on our facing. Grab your front and back facing, and you should have all of your markings transferred. What we're going to do with our front facing is we're going to pin our back facing matching the notches. On your side seams here. All right, so go ahead and press in on your back facing, press down 5/8 of an inch seam allowance on both back facings. So after you stitch down 5/8 for your side seams, then you're going to finish your raw edge of your facing. I'm going to be just serging mine, but you can also press under 5/8 of an inch, and it's just as good. So go ahead and do that, and then we're going to attach this to our dress. With right sides together, you are going to pin your facing to your dress, and be sure to make sure that your back strap is out of the way. You should also be matching up your markings with your straps and your side seams. Let's go ahead and head over to the machine and stitch this down. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to be understitching. So you want to press your seam allowance towards your facing, and we're going to stitch on our facing, not on our dress, but on our facing, to catch that, catch all of our seam allowance. And then I like to trim it down and then give everything a good press, making sure that you don't catch your back straps. So go ahead and trim off your seam allowance and give everything a good press. Then we're going to tack down at our seam allowances, our facing, so that everything lays nice and flat. So at your side seams and on your back opening, we are going to tack down just an easy slip stitch on our seam allowances and our back opening. All right, so go ahead and trim down your seam allowance, give everything a good press, and we're gonna move on to our last and final step. All right, so I've gone ahead and I've finished one of my straps and added in my slider. So we're gonna do our last one here, and we're gonna get our slider. All right, and we are going to go over through the top. Your strap right side should be facing you, and then slide it through. All right, so this is our front, and we're going to continue to slide that slider down, and then grab your back, and we're putting that through with the strap still facing us. Pull it. Now we're going to go underneath the strap on the wrong side, and we're going to go under, doing the same exact thing. Okay, so your strap should look like this on the underside and like this on the front side. So once you have just a little bit remaining, you're going to pull, and then only on the under strap are we going to pin and stitch. So we're only stitching here on this back strap. So if you look at it this way, you can see we won't be stitching on the strap here. So move your strap out of the way and stitch this down. So go ahead and do that for both straps, and we are going to be all done. All right, y'all, we are all done with my Summer No Meat 2045 pattern. You have finished all of your tiers, ruffles, and gathers. I hope you didn't cry too much. I hope you enjoyed this sew along, and I can't wait to see what you all create. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to tag us with your makes at Nomi Patterns and at Simplicity Patterns, and myself at the Corny Rainbow. Until next time, peace.